Just kind of as a definition, it's always good to know what we're talking about. If you have a sustained systolic and diastolic blood pressure that's over 140 over 90, that's considered high blood pressure. The systolic, the top number is when your heart is beating. The diastolic, the bottom number, is when your heart is in between beats. And we're talking about a problem that is widespread in the United States. It's 1 out of 3 adults, 67 million Americans, and almost half of those are not really in good control. So I might just ask, do any of you know of someone with high blood pressure or have high blood pressure yourself? Yeah, also my mom had high blood pressure and struggled with ways of getting that under control. So I know how difficult it can be with high blood pressure to be able to find the right combination of lifestyle changes and medication. So that's what we'll be talking about a bit today. So again, it's the force of the blood pressure as it beats against your blood vessels and your heart. It will rise and fall during the day. It's not going to be just at a steady pace. And hypertension is the term, the clinical term that you would see. And it's making your heart work too hard consistently. So here are the measurements of just seeing up in this category for normal. That's going to be less than the 120 over 80. It's considered pre-hypertension if it's in between what's high blood pressure and what's normal. So the 120 over 139 for the systolic and then 80 to 89 for the diastolic. When you're in this range, usually physicians will say, let's try lifestyle change. Oftentimes they'll say that too if you're in this high blood pressure stage 1 range. But if you're starting to get down into this range, the 160 over 100 and then the 180 and it's higher than 110, that's going to be where you're more in a danger zone and they need to get that blood pressure down right away. So 1 in 3 Americans have high blood pressure. And for people over 50, they're a little more concerned with the systolic number, but both of those numbers are important. So what is the effect? Why is that a problem? Well, if you think of a hose and you've got water running through it, think of the hose as being your blood vessels and the water being your blood. If you cramp the hose and you've got pressure pushing against that, you're going to have much more of an impact on that hose. And it's the same sort of thing with your blood pressure. If you've got high blood pressure and it's forcing blood through your vessels, it can cause damage over time. If it's in the brain, it could be a stroke. If it's in your heart and your arteries, it's going to be leading to cardiovascular problems. If it's in your kidneys, it may lead to some chronic kidney problems. So it affects your organs. High blood pressure is something that is needed to take seriously on how to control it. One of the issues is that you don't feel high blood pressure. And so it's a difficult one to conceptually think, I've got high blood pressure, I need to lower it. If you break an arm and it hurts, you're going to do something to get it fixed. But if you have high blood pressure, you don't feel it. So it can be more difficult to get the motivation to change. It can be also difficult to treat, and there can be needing to be changes over time in order to treat it, and that's why it's important to stay really close with your physician, primary care provider, to think about how to control your blood pressure and to keep monitoring it. But always the first thing that they recommend is lifestyle change. And this, I think, should be a motivating factor. If you think about it, by reducing that systolic blood pressure, the top number, by 12 to 13 millimeters of mercury, you can reduce the incidence of stroke by 37%, of heart disease by 21%, death by cardiovascular disease by 25%, and overall mortality. So, I mean, this is really significant. If you can lower that blood pressure even a little bit, you're going to reduce your chances of having these chronic diseases. So we're going to just kind of go through what the top 6 things are. And what I want to say is that I know as I say these words, they sound straightforward and factual, but when people try to put these things into action, it's hard because people are complex. And we have our lives here at work, we have our lives at home, we've got family and friends that we deal with. We have life issues that cause stress and difficulty, so that anytime you're trying to make a change, it's not easy because we're complex. So please forgive me if these sound straightforward, easy to do. I know they're not. And I know it takes a lot of energy in order to really make changes in order to improve your health. So I don't want to sound like these are easy to do. But first we'll start off with healthy weight. I think have you all heard of body mass index? This is kind of the standard of what our government uses as a beginning base to see where healthy weight is. So it's the ratio of your height to weight. We know that if you're underweight, so if you're down in this category on the chart, there's going to be a risk for mortality. And we also know that if you're above 30, that's going to be a risk. I just went to a conference in Atlanta with our Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and there's some kind of emerging research in this category of being overweight that they may be adjusting that a little bit. It's not quite as clear if you're overweight if you need to get into the normal weight. So I just thought I'd bring that out. That's a little bit of a maybe lessening of the tension of people who are in this overweight category. But part of that is knowing where we carry the weight. So if you're carrying the weight in the middle part of your body, that visceral fat can be more of a problem with the internal organs as far as risk for heart disease and diabetes. If you carry it more on your hips or if you carry it in your arm area, it's probably not as much of a risk. So that's just giving a little bit more of a dimension to what you would classify as having a weight issue. Yeah?
The BMI doesn't take into account body composition, does it?
Right, and that's the other point. That's a very good point. Body mass index is only height to weight ratio. So it's not measuring percent body fat. It's not doing anything to see what your muscle capacity is. So it's one measurement that's easy to do. Everybody can do a height and a weight if you have a scale and can measure accurately your height. To go into more depth would be the bioelectrical impedance, where you're actually measuring percent body fat, and that gives you another piece of the puzzle. If you take a waist circumference, that's another piece of the puzzle. The other factor is your genetic component. There are certain ethnic groups that are going to carry weight in different areas. So you want to look at people as whole people, but the standard is the body mass index, so that's where you start. But real good question. We do know that the dieting, the yo-yo dieting, going up and down with weight, going on a drastic diet in order to get your weight down but not able to sustain that, and so you gain the weight back, those things are not healthy. We know that for sure. So that if you're wanting to deal with finding out what is for you a healthy body weight, it really can be helpful to see a registered dietitian nutritionist. And for those of you who are employees at the university, that's seen as a free benefit through the Human Resource Department. So feel free to give me a call or my colleague Jody a call, and we can work through some of the complex issues of why it's difficult to maintain a healthy body weight. Again, like I said, it's not an easy thing to do. So let's talk a little bit about being physically active. I just got this from, this is a Medscape listserv that I'm on, and it's from a physician called Dr. Mandrola. And he gives a case study. He says, a man came in, he's sedentary, he was a middle-aged man, he's a teacher, and he had high blood pressure. And so he says, I see you're here for your yearly follow-up. What have you been doing in the past year? And his client says, well, I've been great. I'm not short of breath. I've lost weight. My heart rhythms is now smooth. I sleep better. And the best part of it is I have more energy. So the doctor says, well, what did you do? And the patient says, I filled your prescription. So the doctor says, I don't think I prescribed any medicine. And the man says, well, you told me to exercise every day that I eat. So how many days do we eat? And maybe even pick a goal. So I did it. I started out walking, then I started to run, and now I'm going to do a half marathon. So this physician says, well, I'm amazed at the capability of the human heart. Regular people who make a commitment to exercise can develop cardiac changes that are seen in elite athletes. And that is really big. So it's oftentimes how wellness begins. It starts with a spark, a little click. So this teacher said, okay, I'll try it. He started out slowly, he walked, and then something happened. His body started to change. It wasn't just his heart, but his glucose metabolism improved. The brain function sharpened. He could think more clearly. He had better sleep. His mitochondria grew more efficient. And so overnight, an unhealthy person became healthy, and his high blood pressure and arrhythmia weren't necessary to compensate anymore in his body. So he'd found what the spark was to actually make him change. And that's what I'm hoping with this talk that I'm giving will give you the idea that, you know what, it is worth the effort. Start slow, and it may be just little changes at a time that make the big difference. So I thought I would share that story. So as we talk about exercise, here are the facts. These are the things we know from research. It's going to reduce your risk of heart disease. It's going to drop your blood pressure. It'll tone your muscles in your joints. It improves your balance. It can help with weight loss and help with sleep. And one of the new factors that was at this conference that I learned is that even exposure to small amounts of sunlight can increase nitric oxide, which reduces blood pressure. What the recommendation is about 10 minutes of unsunscreened skin during the day, and it can be on different parts of your body. So if you want to cover your face, if there's areas that you would rather not have sunlight, but it could be your legs or your feet, but about 10 minutes a day. So besides just thinking of getting a little sunlight here and there for vitamin D, here's another reason that maybe in just the way human beings are, that we do need to get a little sunlight. And it may be that in itself, besides being relaxing, being out in nature, seeing things that are beautiful, but a little bit of sunlight might actually help with reducing blood pressure. So in 2008, they made the physical activity guidelines for Americans, and this is kind of the minimum of what we could do for health. And if you think about it, it's about a half an hour, 5 times a week of fast walking. It's moderate level exercise. If you don't like to do moderate level exercise, you can bump it up to an hour and 15 minutes of very vigorous exercise. But I think I like what this physician said, is just the days that you're going to eat, get some exercise. I think that's a good one. So that deals with the aerobic. But then there's also the recommendation of a couple times a week doing something that works your major muscle groups. So it works your back, your arms, your quadriceps, the main muscle groups of your body. And that's a couple times a week. And then having the strength and flexibility exercises to keep range of motion, be able to keep from getting injured. So those are the Surgeon General's recommendations. Here at the University of Arizona, we've really tried through our employee wellness program to give opportunities to have exercise at work. I know for myself, I'm tired by the time I get home by 6:30, got to make dinner, and then you got to clean up. And then I'm kind of an evening person, not a morning person, so I can't get up early to do things. I can do it on the weekend, but I find that if I can incorporate some of these things during my workday, it really helps out. So we have stairs in most of the buildings. If you can take a 5-minute break, go up and down some stairs, take a break during the day to walk 15 minutes. We also have resistance bands classes that we hold here in this building on Mondays from noon to 1. And Bettina there is one of our people that come regularly. There's Tai Chi that Jody, my colleague, teaches, and that again is for relaxation, which can help with blood pressure and also balance. Campus Rec has classes they offer. We do walks with campus leaders. So if you'd like to join us for a walk with campus leaders, we're going to meet out at the UAMC entrance on the med school patio there, and then just go for a 20-minute walk. It's kind of a chance to meet some of the campus leaders. And you can go to our website and see other ones for that, as well as Wellness in Action of what different people are doing here on campus to improve their physical activity. Now I'd like to get into what the nutrition component is, and this would be the dietary approach to stop hypertension. So I'm excited about this. It correlates with information we have on the Mediterranean diet. It's very closely linked with what you would do if you had diabetes. It's just good, healthy food that work for you. So we're looking at lots of fruits and vegetables, lower in the saturated fats, kind of watching, keeping away from the really high fat type things, free from trans fat, which is your partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. I would say shortening. Lower in sugar, lower in salt, and if it's alcohol, if you use, then just in moderation. It is interesting that the U.S. News and World Report listed the dietary approach to stop hypertension, the DASH diet, as the #1 diet when they reviewed it for all considerations, and that was in the January issue. So here's the overview. This is kind of what the research was when they put this together. The foods that are chosen are going to be rich in some minerals: potassium, magnesium, and calcium. It's also got good supplies of fiber and of protein. It's lower in sodium, lower in the saturated fats and sweets. And again, something that's very interesting is that as you eat more of the vegetables, you are increasing nitric oxide, which again has cardioprotection. So part of this was not mentioned in the literature. This is kind of an emerging field, with the nitric oxide being a vasodilator and one that can help with decreasing blood pressure and heart disease. So it's kind of, you may see that more in the research and popular literature that's coming out, and it's another reason why the DASH diet is good. Lots of different variety of fruits and vegetables. We've had the whole campaign, you know, the 5 a day, that talked about the different colors. So it's getting a variety of different vegetables and fruit. When people followed the DASH diet compared to a typical American diet, blood pressure dropped significantly. So here are just, I don't have to go through a lot of these. If this was a technical talk, I would be giving you what the research is, but lots of the research went into when you did the DASH diet, blood pressure came down. If you also included exercise and being at a healthy weight, it came down even further. So the conclusion is people with high blood pressure, if they can follow this DASH diet, kind of watch the amount of sodium, and maintain a healthy weight, they will lower their blood pressure. So that's just really encouraging news. And then the other fact is, if you even don't have high blood pressure, it's a good pattern to follow. Very similar to the Mediterranean diet. And it's going to decrease your risk of developing high blood pressure. Okay, so here is, if you think of a typical, all of your food labels are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So I just took that as the basis. For the gentlemen that are in the audience, you're probably going to eat a little more. For the women in the audience, you might eat a little less. So just kind of use this as an average of what it looks like. So you're thinking about whole grains. You're going to want to have some of those during the day. For vegetables and fruit, it's thinking about 4 to 5 servings of vegetable and of fruit each day. It's lots of vegetables and a lot of fruit. And for those of you that have the handout, you don't need to, write it down. I've got it on the inside. And also, if you go to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, or even if you just Google DASH, it will pull up. And you can also order the whole booklet. So I've got the information. You're wanting to have calcium sources. And you also need protein. Not large amounts of protein, but you need enough protein in your diet to meet your body's needs. And then the thing that's different with this is it's including nuts and seeds and beans 4 to 5 times a week. You're adding those in. And I'll kind of go through what that is, why that's important. Fats and oils, it's kind of, dealing with the healthy fats. And then the other consideration here is sweets. It's only, a small amount during the week, about 5 times during the week having a serving. So that's sugar in your tea or coffee, sweetened drinks, pastries, cookies. It's a low amount of sugar. So the reason why you need those fruits and vegetables is because of potassium. Like I mentioned, that's the mineral. So sometimes when you think of potassium, you might think of orange juice or bananas. You might even think of tomatoes and potatoes. But if you look at this list, there are a lot of fruits and vegetables that contain potassium. So if you're getting a variety of vegetables and fruit, you're going to be getting a good source of potassium. So that's just important to know. How many of you are picky eaters and don't really like vegetables? Are there anyone here? Okay, yeah, it can be hard to expand your repertoire of vegetables if you just really don't like them. It takes about 10 times of trying a new food before you actually get accustomed to the taste. So just remember that if you're trying something new, you may not like it right away, but try it again and then try it again. But anyway, there's a lot of variety here. And it's the same with calcium. Calcium is needed. And if you probably think that dairy products are the main source of calcium, but there's many people who can't take fresh milk. So there's other sources you can use to get your calcium. So you can get it from tofu, in soy milk. You can get it in some vegetables, kale, broccoli, Chinese cabbage have some. And the other one that's interesting is it's also in corn tortillas. So in our population here, close to Mexico, choose your corn tortillas instead of the flour, and you will be getting some calcium in that also. And then the last one is the magnesium. That's the other metal nutrient, the mineral that you need. And those are good in beans as well as nuts and seeds and some of the leafy vegetables. Peanut butter would be also a good source, black-eyed peas. Lots of literature about including more beans in your diet, not just for the DASH diet, but also for a healthy GI tract, to have a good combination of the bacteria that's in our large intestine. If you can't eat beans, if they cause some of the complications with gas, try to incorporate them a little at a time into your diet. But beans have lots of just really good health reasons as to why to include them. So that's kind of an overview of the DASH. Reducing sodium is also part of the DASH diet. And the goal is not on the really, really low side. It's about a teaspoon a day, and that would be all sources of salt, which is naturally occurring in food anyway. But thinking about putting the salt shaker away and using other flavorings. And again, that's why I have the handout, this Spice of Life. We've got some ideas of what different spices taste good on foods. Using fresh instead of processed. Probably the highest level of sodium is going to be in restaurant foods and in foods that are already processed. So if you're cooking yourself, you can add a small amount of salt or have a little on the table, but it's when you eat out and it's when you're buying already prepared foods as to when you're really getting more of the salt. If you're going to, say, a Chinese or a Mexican, Italian restaurant, you may be getting around the 2,300 milligrams just in that meal by itself. And you can look on the food labels if you're buying packaged goods. The emerging research that was at this conference is that there may be harm to the very low levels of sodium. They were mentioning the 1,500 milligram. If you're getting into a really, really restricted sodium, that could be a problem, as well as high levels. So you're wanting to stay in that middle range. If we're thinking about alcohol, so here's the question on what is moderate level of alcohol. And this would be, again, from dietary guidelines for Americans, 1 drink for women, 2 for men daily. And what constitutes a drink? It would be a 12-ounce beer or 5 ounces, which is a little over a half a cup of wine, or an ounce of a distilled spirit. If you don't drink, probably don't start. You know, if you're drinking in excess, there can be problems with not only the alcoholism, but also raising blood pressure. And they definitely have calories. So when you're taking a glass of wine with a meal, or you want a beer when you get home from work, just realize that that needs to be counted in as far as the amount of calories that are in them. So kind of thinking on some of the last issues that we were going to talk about, I'm not going to get into the different kinds of medications. There are times when medication is definitely needed. Again, because you're not feeling the difference when your blood pressure, it's important to monitor blood pressure if you have high blood pressure. Have a unit at home, or be able to have a way of checking your blood pressure to see how you're doing throughout the day. Take the medications that your healthcare provider gives you, and if you have side effects or if there's things you don't like about it, communicate with them so that they can adjust them. Consult with a pharmacist if you want more information on drug interactions with other drugs. It's just important that once you start on a medication that you communicate well with those that have prescribed it. And there's just a few foods that have lots of interactions with blood pressure medication. Pomegranate is one, and with the increased use of pomegranate juice or pomegranate as a supplement, just know that if you are on medication, there may be some interaction with pomegranate. The other one is grapefruit. Grapefruit is one that has lots of interactions with a variety of different drugs. And then licorice. If you're a black licorice person and love licorice, that may have some effect on blood pressure also. So those are just some things to think about. Another factor is tobacco. This is, again, something that we know for sure is harmful as far as cancer risk. It's also a risk as far as heart disease and cardiovascular disease and blood pressure. Again, talking about stopping things that are difficult to stop, stopping a nicotine habit is extremely difficult. So it's easy to put the slide up, it's easy to say go for help, but it's really, really hard to stop. And I can think of myself when I was in graduate school, I started smoking. I had valley fever, I didn't have any energy, so why would I start smoking? It's because you don't always do logical things. I did not do a logical thing at that point. However, I did. So then you have to deal with, okay, how am I going to quit? And so, it took a couple, 3, 4 years, and it was still difficult, even though I wasn't a heavy smoker, and I hadn't had it in my family, and I didn't have all the other things that burdened me down, but it was still really hard to stop. So if you have people you love who smoke, if you've got friends that use tobacco, there is help available. There's the Arizona Smokers Helpline, the ASH line. That is a really important resource. And we now have a tobacco-free campus here at the university. If you see coworkers or people that are struggling with that, let them know that there are resources available. And you can't finish this talk on high blood pressure without mentioning the fact that stress definitely has an impact on blood pressure. It's, again, another one of those lifestyle things that are not easy to fix. The emotional issues that we deal with, either in a work situation or at home, definitely add stress to life. We have a counselor through Life and Work Connections, Dave, who's a licensed professional counselor. Again, it's a free benefit, just as our services as dietitians are a free benefit. So feel that if that's an issue, or if you know of someone who's going through difficulty, seeking help can be really important. It's done on a one-to-one confidential level to be able to deal with some of the factors that are causing a high blood pressure issue. So going back to that slide at the beginning of the talk where I was saying that if you can reduce your top number, the systolic blood pressure, by 12 to 13 milligrams of mercury, you could reduce stroke, you could reduce heart disease, you could reduce cardiovascular disease and all causes of mortality. The things that we've talked about, here are some of the results of how much you can lower that blood pressure. So if you have a body mass index, if you're at a healthy weight, you can reduce that by 5 to 20 milligrams. If you follow the DASH diet, you can reduce it by 8 to 14. And that's just the DASH diet alone, without the added exercise or weight management. If you just reduce sodium in a typical diet, you can reduce some. If you add physical activity, you're going to reduce some. And if you are limiting alcohol, you can reduce. So if you're thinking of that 12 to 13 millimeters to drop it by, just think about if you started principles of that DASH diet, you started to do some physical activity, you perhaps reduce the sodium a little bit, you could reach that goal. And then little at a time, small steps, start walking, start adding an extra serving of vegetables at dinner. Bring a salad with some cabbage and some dark greens and some grated carrots. Bring that at lunch. Small things, small steps to gradually move you towards this, and you will see it at drop in blood pressure. So that's just really encouraging. Yeah.
Do you have to drink alcohol every day to get the 2 to 4 drop in blood pressure?
This is more kind of generic, looking at more of an epidemiological. It's not looking at individual people. So the alcohol, the question was whether drinking alcohol is a good thing to drink it every day so that it would drop your blood pressure by that amount. And I don't think you can make that correlation. It's more kind of looking in general of what the principles are. I think having more than, like some people will drink just on weekends and not drink during the day or during the week. That probably is not a good pattern because that's having more all at once. So that can be an issue. If it's a small glass of wine or it's a little bit of beer each day, that may be more spreading it out. That's a little more like what the Mediterranean diet recommendations are. That's a good question. So these are the major factors, just kind of in review. Maybe pick what you feel would be a good place to start. Don't think of everything all at once. It could be starting to be a little more physically active. It could be thinking about now's the time to get into more of a healthy weight. It could be following some of those DASH diet principles, adding those in. Could be thinking about maybe I'm smoking and I'm using alcohol and I need to deal with that. So just be thinking about small steps, things that you could start with. But this is the whole picture. And again, remembering that we're complex individuals, any type of change is going to be difficult to do. So if we can be of help here, that's why Life and Work Connections is here. So those are the main points that I wanted to bring. These are some of the sources. You can go to our website as well as American Heart Association. There's things through National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Good things on Centers for Disease Control. So there's good resources out there. All right, well, thank you very much. Hopefully it's been of help to you. Okay, thanks.